Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hi, Shashi.
Hi.
Hi, Paul. Yeah, I see that enough presence is there. I'm not sure about Quinton if he'll be joining today. So I guess we can start. So today, yeah, I guess one of the primary topics for today would be maybe define a date or a weekend where we can possibly think of cutting out the alpha release. And possibly we can also talk the status of the features that we intend to see in the release.
That sounds sensible to me.
Yeah. So yeah, migration to CRD seems to be one of the most prominent ones, like most active ones as of now, and a big amount of change. So Maru, you wanna say something? I saw that you did raise a PR, and I could understand what you are doing in that PR. So maybe we can start with that.
I am currently a little bit stuck because CRD support for sub-resources is really, I don't know, it's just something that's been under active development for 1.11. And so moving to CRDs effectively means that we would not be able to support anything less than 1.11, which is probably fine. But as I mentioned yesterday, I wanted to raise it. Because that means there's no ability to like install Federation on a previous version of Kubernetes and have it work.
What were the issues that you hit with CRD sub-resources in 1.10?
They literally do not work at all. You cannot register a CRD that contains a status resource and have it work.
Okay.
So they fixed that bug in the 1.11 timeframe, and I'm basically building. I suppose I could probably pull an alpha binary for Kube API server, but I'm building it from master, and at least I can register a CRD with status. But when I go to try to update status specifically for cluster resources, because that's kind of instrumental, or it's like fundamental to the propagation, is maintaining cluster status, like ready, not ready. And it's like, sorry, that is not something you can do. I can't find that resource. So I'm asking the person who's been working on CRD sub-resources to see what the deal is, because I'm assuming this is a feature that should work. So I'm expecting that will be something we can resolve. But as I said, like, there will be no ability to use this on 1.10 or previous. It will have to be 1.11 forward only.
So is Nikita the person that you've been talking to?
I've asked her a question, and I haven't heard back from her yet. I'm just kind of contacting her this morning.
Okay. Do you have pointers to like any issues for this in upstream? It sounds like we should definitely. I'm sorry, in Kubernetes. It sounds like we should definitely open an issue.
Well, I'm trying to clarify with her whether there should be an issue, because it looks like there are E2E tests that should verify this behavior.
Okay.
And if there's something I'm doing wrong, I'd like to clarify that.
Okay, maybe you and I can spend a little time like digging into this offline. I'm very interested in making sure that CRDs work correctly, and the status sub-resource should have been supported at 1.10. So
it was supported. There was just bugs that would preclude you from using it productively.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the accounting on that one. In terms of what the details are.
Maru, what did you mean when you mentioned that This can work 1.11 onwards. So you are saying that this particular issue is not there in the 1.11 branch.
There is an issue, but 110, I can't even register CRDs with status. Like
Oh.
we try to create the CRD and there's a validation error. Like there's a bug in validation for 110 and they fixed it for 111. So it's all to say, like, this is just, yeah, it's just
Okay,
really.
okay. That sounds a little um, lame, I would say. Like, we have been talking about CRDs since quite some time, right? Almost maybe a year now. And we know that they have been in active development. Uh,
I mean, it's coming.
if
It's just that
yeah, if this
it's something
seems
that's
like this, yeah, go ahead, Mal. Yeah, what I was saying is if this seems like the status of CRDs, maybe we might wait for this move for some time.
I mean, I'd like to clarify whether it's going to be possible to use this, whether, you know, it looks like they're trying to get this working, but it may not have enough consumers to be flushing out bugs, and so we're one of those consumers.
Yeah, I would say that we should, one, verify that there's actually a bug. If there is a bug and it's going to get fixed in 111, we can talk about whether it can be cherry picked in 110. But I think that we're effectively in a position of, like, we may be ahead of others in terms of our adoption of certain CRD features. So let's make sure that as we find these bugs, we drive them to be fixed. In the sense of, like, not necessarily drive the development of the fixes, but drive via expressing there's a need and working with people to identify what's going on.
My raising this issue was less about, oh, should we go with CRDs or not, on the basis of the maturity of the support we need. I was more considering, like, is everyone on board with the fact that we're going to be supporting forward versions of Kubernetes only? I think we've kind of touched on this, but I just wanted to clarify, because if at some point in the future, you know, stakeholders say, oh yeah, I want to be able to install it on Cube 110, 109, whatever, and are surprised when that's not possible, that would be undesirable. I'd rather people are sort of aware of this before we commit to the move. Well, before we finalize the move, I guess is a better way of putting it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Maru. And I think there's two dimensions of this. Like, one is the dimension that we just talked to about, like, if there is a bug that there's a possible backport for to 110, I think that we should drive that. And it does raise the question of, like, which I think you just touched on, of what is the minimum supported version that we're really shooting for. And I think my own subjective opinion on that subject is, I think it's fine to target 111 forward, especially since the timing of this, if I'm not mistaken, should be close to when 111 is released. So it's also an alpha component. And I think it's okay in that sense to be using features that might not be in every cluster yet, might need to, that like a target cluster might need to upgrade to get a bug fix for to correctly support. I'd be curious to know, though, what other people on the call might be targeting in terms of supported versions.
What I understand is that although we specify, like in Federation V1, we did state a soft disclaimer kind of a thing that we do not take responsibility of backward compatibility and that kind of stuff. still it used to work with a good amount of versions queue. Like say for example, Federation, if released with 1.9, worked with 1.8 and in fact 1.7 also of
That
K8s
was,
clusters.
you say work though, that was not, I was like, well, it seems to work, but there is zero guarantee that a newer version of
Yeah,
Federation.
yeah, Maru, I was not really deriving at that point I mean,
No, sorry.
Federation V1 worked or something. What I was trying to establish was that what I have seen in the environments is that almost nobody actually uses the just released or the latest K8s version. Like the team that we have in Huawei, which handles uh, the features which they pull in from upstream, would have a fair amount of gap between what they are releasing to their customers and what the community or the upstream version is as of today. They have tried to narrow down that gap a lot, but they struggle. Like at least one version difference, 3 months to 4 months difference remains. So if we put this kind of a blocker that uh, say Federation cannot be used, uh, uh, whatever latest version of K8s or prior to that, then it seems like a little unusable in the sense, or means if we give it to customers, then for them it will be a little unusable.
So I think there's a tension here, like in not in our group, not socially. I mean there's a tension between uh, adoption in terms of like Irfan. My experience is very similar to yours in that like the pace that we develop Kubernetes and release new versions of Kubernetes does not necessarily match at all the pace that a customer or user adopts them, because users have to learn how to use new features and there's only so much they can take at a time. Users don't want to skip multiple versions in one upgrade, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so I think you make a very good point, and that probably means for folks in the community that are on older versions of Kubernetes, that for them, they may have to like set up special areas to try it out. With all that said, we are talking about an alpha, so I don't think that anybody realistically needs to put Alpha Federation V2 in production. And there's probably a significant amount of adoption that has to happen with Federation V2 to the point where people get comfortable enough to even consider putting it into production. So that's a little less of a concern for me. But I also think that in this particular case that we're talking about, it's a pretty significant question about what our priorities are, because the sub-resource stuff that we've been talking through, like what hangs in the balance for that, as far as I can personally tell, is whether you would be able to federate via CRDs arbitrary sub-resources or arbitrary like CRDs. And I think that is very central to what will make Federation V2 really usable. So that's something that we need to consider about this. And I don't think that we're in a place where we can like make a decision yet. For example, like I haven't seen any details about this particular situation that we've hit. So we need to investigate it, but I think it's pretty important to have these in the sense that it's kind of unlikely to me that if we go with like a static API server that you can't easily, and maybe there's a way that we could accomplish this without moving Fog onto KubeBuilder, but I think an important part of what makes Federation V2 usable is to use it with types that we're not aware of in this group. So that would be my concern, because I perceive, and it may not be an accurate perception, but I perceive that that is deeply linked with fundamentally, are we using CRDs or are we using an API server that we handcraft? EOF.
So let me say a scenario like this is what I, Shashi, and a couple of other folks which are involved with this effort had in mind. So, for example, especially in China, I mean, most of Huawei's current users are actually based out of China. So, our engagement is basically through meetups or customer conferences or open source conferences like KubeCon and all. For example, next week we have an open source con and Linux con. That's one of the biggest conferences in China. That's what we are going to attend. So we engage with our users and customers in a way where one of my responsibility is to showcase Federation V2 to them, and then encourage them to try to use it in whatever clusters they are running it, and that's how I mean the path forward that we see for Federation V2 is. So if I say give, I mean, and we were hoping that around this time we might have an alpha release which we can give out to the users and say, you can maybe follow this document or download this binary from here and try it out on your cluster. And they, for example, are running the cluster which we have released to them, or some other cluster which they might themselves be running. In most cases, it will not be the latest. If we say a release is based out of CRD and that runs only on 1.11, it is like a no-show, complete no-show, right? So that's where I mean that's where I'm coming from. So we basically need to give something to them which is usable, and provided, yeah, Maru, as you mentioned, I mean, if it's really, we also need to establish that whatever you are observing is really a blocker, it's an issue, or it's like maybe some way we are utilizing it wrong.
Yeah, I think honestly that we need to fully investigate this before we get too far down the road of like,
yeah,
we need to change course at all. I mean, with all that said, Irfan, like, I think that we're already using features that we need 110 for. So that is the question to me of like, is the minimum supported version 110 or 111?
What do you mean by, Paul? Already using features that we need 110 for?
I'm pretty sure, for example, that the cluster registry uses features that are available only in 110.
Like what?
I am not sure about that, Paul, because I have been, all my setup has been running on 1.9 as of now. And I haven't, I mean, because whatever docs or scripts that we have, they haven't migrated to the latest of cluster registry. I don't know of any such dependency.
I think cluster registry as it stands today doesn't use like status. So I don't think it's a compatibility issue with 110, but moving to CRD, I don't know. Right now, moving to CRDs is basically being done like en masse. It's being done for both Fed v2 and we're moving to cluster registry CRD at the same time. Because of dependencies, like it seemed to be really complicated to do it otherwise. I mean, I'm not even sure 110 is the issue. I think we talk about 111 being like the minimum. Yeah, the minimum for the alpha, but realistically, we're not going to be releasing until like 113. So that is more realistically the minimum.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Maru, and it's something that we all need to keep in mind is that like this is for an initial alpha release, and there are going to be different versions of Kubernetes in play by the time we get to the point where it could potentially go beta.
But that does beg the question. I mean, there has been discussion about maintaining only forwards compatibility, and that would mean that, you know, by the time we get to a beta release that someone could potentially want to start testing out in some sort of production scenario, does that mean they have to be running the latest Kubernetes? Because that really does limit, as you guys have been discussing, that limits the potential base of users to early adopters rather than somebody who actually has production workloads.
So I would say also there's another factor that we need to consider, which is that my experience developing additional API servers has been that having a distinct API server that requires its own storage is basically a non-starter for many, many users and a lot of cloud vendors. So this is not a choice between, this is not like a one-sided choice of CRDs have hypothetically might have some bugs or something that put a lower bound on the version of Kubernetes that Federation will work correctly with. My experience has been that the data requirement for a distinct API server just makes it a total non-starter for a lot of users. So there are real costs to going with an approach that requires distinct storage from Kubernetes itself. Anyway, I think that we should avoid tricking ourselves into thinking that we have to make some decision here right at this moment. Let's investigate the status issue more closely.
I'd like to point out that I'm not sure that CRD versus API server, I think to me, just working out the bugs is the issue. If for some reason somebody wanted to be able to run a CRD-based Federation API, there's nothing stopping them from running a newer Kube API just for that, or a tiny cluster that just did Federation and served older clusters that were a different version. I mean, provided we, don't mind the skew, that it's safe.
That's a really good point, and I think that we should probably be explicit about that. No matter what, the specific thread that we're talking through now, no matter how that resolves, but there's a very different version dependency between what version of Kubernetes do you need to run Federation v2 versus what versions of clusters can you target with Federation v2?
I mean, potentially, I'm not saying it's necessarily something that we really want to do, but there'd be nothing stopping somebody from creating a CRD for an old version of a Kubernetes resource. Creating the propagation primitives for an older version. If they really wanted to. I'm not saying that we would want to do that ourselves, but once we go dynamic, there's nothing stopping somebody from supporting things that they want to support. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does to some extent. See, my intention is simple. We focus that as a work group we ideally should have now is to have or to take steps which can move us towards making this product useful and users should be easily be able to try it out. I mean, as a first step, they should be able to try it out easily. And if they see the utility, then maybe they'll be willing to have limitations it's only forward compatible, so they need to run the latest cluster, K-test cluster, even if it means only to support the FCP deployment. Those kind of things maybe can be secondary, unless from the Red Hat's perspective, you already have real customers and requirements for this as of now, and that's what you need to satisfy. We have had some customers for Federation V1, but because it did not basically make the progress we were expecting to make, we are sort of like on a standstill from that point of view?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, Irfan, that's my goal as well in terms of making it easy to use and easy to try out. I think that no matter what, like part of doing that is having a story, which we already do, though it needs massage and needs some changes. Uh, the story of like you want to go from nothing to you've got a toy federation, like, and that includes teaching people how to stand up Minikube for Federation to live in.
Correct.
So
Correct.
the story of you want to try it out and you want to target clusters that you already have, I think is very close to you want to try it out and you want to target some Minikube like things that you just stood up that don't really mean anything to you. So no matter what, I think we probably need to have documentation for how to do both of those.
Yep. And I guess, I mean, we can cut this discussion short and maybe revisit if we want to, because Maru basically needs to establish if that really is a blocker issue, that what he's observing right now, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think I figured it out actually.
Really?
Are you serious?
Yeah, no, I was just looking at the test code and comparing it with the code that KubeBuilder was generating, and it looks like the problem is that KubeBuilder doesn't generate sub-resources. It generates an open API schema, and I was obscuring from the fact that it doesn't define sub-resources.
Ah, okay.
So,
I can help with that.
yeah, well, we'll probably have to update the code generator to do that. I don't think we want to manually generate sub-resources for all the CRD defs, but yeah, at least we have a way forward.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So the sub-resource generation should basically just be a couple fields in the CRD definition.
Yeah, it doesn't look too complicated. It's just we have to update KubeBuilder's generators to do that.
Yeah, okay. I can work on that with you after this.
Okay.
All right. So I think, are we all talked through that and I can give an update on the image build stuff, or Lindsay?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so Lindsay and I have been working on doing an automated build of a canary image from master. So what that means is that like every time there's a commit that goes into master, we'll rebuild this image. And that's really like the first step that we need to make to start moving away from you need to actually have API server builder or Kube builder CLI on your machine to deploy Federation. So Lindsay, do you want to give an update on like where that is? I think you said you got it working locally. Why don't you give an update on where that is?
Yeah, I've been able to build a container with API server and controller manager, which is what the API server builder was doing, well, part of it. So now I just have to work on capturing those in the deploy Federation script and make sure that it's working not locally as well, I guess.
Yeah.
So currently, I have a question for this. So currently we have, it's not a CI job, it's like a pre-commit job, which runs on each new commit on a PR.
Yeah.
And we don't have a CI like periodic job kind of a thing, or a post commit, which will be once a PR is like merged. After that, a job would run. So what exactly would this be run on?
So Irfan, the idea is that we turn on, so we do have a master build that happens right now, even though the script is called pre-commit. Like it's just a script that does the binary builds and runs the Go tests right now is basically what it does. It calls the go format verify.
Okay.
The idea, and we run that same flow when there's a commit to master. So the CI, Travis CI badge on the Federation repo reflects the status of the build and master. And what Lindsay's working on is that when the build is being run in master, and the so when it's being run in master and the pre-commit script that does all that stuff, like the CI checks, works correctly, that will build a container image and push to the quay.io image repository that I've set up. So she's got it working locally. The next steps are to like actually enable it to happen in Travis. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that what I understood was that there is another job which I was not aware of, which is something like a post PR kind of a job. Is there a link or something which probably to Travis where
it's actually
this could be found?
It just runs for both pull requests, and it runs when things go into master. And I actually, it looks like we don't have the badge up anymore, or maybe I was misremembering since I've set that up for a ton of stuff recently. I'll give you a link to a job. I'll give you a link.
Yeah. I mean, my point was only this, that if it is not there, we basically, it might be the same job which runs on pre-commits, which we will need as a post PR or post commit kind of a thing, which runs on master, as you mentioned. Hello, am I still connected?
I'm finding a link.
Oh, okay. I thought I got it. I got off the internet.
Oh, never mind. There's something down at the end.
Cool, thanks. Okay.
So, barring any changes in terms of like CI, we can also make Travis do this for release tags eventually, so that when you do a tag, like when you do a GitHub release, it will kick off a Travis job that builds that Git tag associated with the release and can push tagged images out too, which is actually what we've done in Service Catalog. It seems to work pretty well. So
yeah, that's the same thing we basically did for Fed v1. So if you tag a particular commit, then only it will build the image and push the release to whatever locations you have specified.
Yep. We should probably start thinking about how we're going to run EDD tests in CI. I think that's a pretty big question. But it's worth starting to think about. We've talked about that before, but I don't think anybody's begun working at all on running EDs with real Kubernetes clusters or like hollow API servers in CI yet, have they?
No, I don't think anybody, I mean, from Huawei, like I or Shashi haven't explored it yet. Yeah, but there are two possible possible directions we...
I have a colleague, I think.
Ruben wants to say something.
Sorry, I believe you have a colleague that was working on enabling testing with hollow nodes.
Yeah. His name is Dilip. He's So he had he was contributing to integration framework or something. That's what he started, and he did this effort for some time. But I'm not sure that PR was merged or not. So I can follow it up with him and figure out if where it is at, and maybe he can help us do that. Yeah.
And I think he stalled out at one point, and I told him to get back to me when he'd had a chance to review
Mhm.
the feedback, and I don't remember ever hearing back from him. But if for some reason I dropped the ball, please let me know.
No, no. I'll try to get in touch with him and figure out what's the status of that. Okay. What I was talking about, that I think we did talk about possibilities of running E2E. One was that we can have Minikube or DIN-like clusters and have a job that we have as of now, a similar job in Travis itself. The other possibility is that we can have a test infra-based job, but that's much more complicated than doing this. But neither I or Shashi has given, any further thought on this. And we probably would be able to do that post the release, once the release is done.
Cool.
Yeah.
Shashi, do you want to give an update on DNS?
Yeah, there was this demo. Before that, let's just quickly have a chat about, do we want to put up a set or list of features that we want in alpha, or whatever is there in it is in, whatever is not, it's not part of that, and we can have more releases like weekly or something post that.
I thought we've already done that exercise and that everybody was looking at the GitHub milestone.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I sort of actually did not put milestones against all the issues that I created. Yeah, I'll do that for the ones which we think we'll be able to complete.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had thought everybody's list was put into the milestone. I'll put a link to that milestone in the chat.
Cool.
Yeah,
That'll be great.
you
Thanks.
should make sure to get that finalized. Like, do people want to take an action item to make sure by next week that, like, issues that are in V1 Alpha 1 are representative of what people think is necessary for an initial alpha release?
Yeah, it should be good enough for us. Yeah, we can move to Shashi's topic.
Okay. I'll share my screen now.
Yeah, please.
Okay, I just a minute. I kind of put down some draft about that feature. It is not fine-tuned, but I'll try to take you along this feature, how it is implemented right now in V2. If you have any questions, yeah, you can interrupt me in between. Currently in V2 now we are trying to implement a new API, that is that multi-cluster service DNS API, which contains all the information required to program the DNS for this particular feature. Yeah, I think I need not go through in detail about what all it contains right now. I think it is already there in the code right now. So, okay, there is two options we thought of implementing. First option would be maintaining the same status quo as the V1, where we had developed a DNS provider library, and already we supported 4 DNS providers in that. So there are certain differences between this provider library and the new approach we thought. But still, for a time moment, I think it would make sense to hold on to this feature for little more until we mature the other option. Okay, this is the option 1. So this is what comes from the Federation control plane or the Federation API server. So this DNS here, it acts like a tool which will monitor for this API objects and then program the DNS. These are the global DNS options we have. We have a DNS provider library. So through that, the Federation DNS programs this DNSs. Okay, so the option 2 we have is almost similar, but instead here Federation DNS will be acting like a service, like a server, and external DNS is a tool in Kubernetes incubator, which can be configured to use any source right now. It would be requesting the endpoints which needs to be provided. That Federation DNS server will be providing that endpoints list, and external DNS will take care of programming the DNS, global DNS. So there are quite a lot of DNS servers already supported by external DNS, and kind of they are taking care of lot many details related to DNS, which we are not taking care in our implementations. So I think it makes sense in the long term to go along to use the external DNS. So only thing is maybe we need to see further to mature it. So for now we have both the options, but going forward we will go with this option. And just a hint, like this is a endpoint endpoint structure which is expected by the external DNS, the name and the targets, what type of record, TTL, and the labels for that endpoint. So further to that, how the service discovery happens through this. It's a very brief. I am going to explain. If you are not able to follow, maybe you can interrupt here. So from external clients, how it happens is there is a global DNS, which is basically one of this DNS providers, as we have shown here. This global DNS is going to be programmed by our Federation DNS tool to add the DNS records to match the status of the federated service. Any external client, for example, you will use this naming scheme to access a service, federated service. The federated service name, the namespace, and this is the federation name, and this is a keyword, and this is the domain. So we can form a federation of multiple clusters, and federation has a name, and it is associated with a domain. And each cluster, there's a prerequisite, like each cluster should have a region and a zone labels. So any client who is accessing this, he will find a DNS record for this, and there could be a multiple targets for this particular DNS record. And further to this, it really depends on the capabilities of the global DNS, what records it is giving to the clients. So it can be doing a round robin, or it could be doing a maybe the nearest service shard. Based on the capabilities of global DNS, it can be done. Right now, there are many options right now for the global DNS.
Shashi, interrupting, I have a question about this federation name.
Yeah.
So where is it, I mean, in what form or where is it stored now? Like earlier we used to have some mechanism of initializing the federation control plane, and it was used or stored in annotation somewhere.
Yeah. So right now we give this federation name in the tool Federation DNS. When we start the Federation DNS tool, we are giving the name of the federation for that. And coming to internal client, so I've put it as local DNS. Right now it is KubeDNS, but there are efforts towards moving towards core DNS as a local DNS service. So what will happen is any internal client, he can use a short form like the federation service namespace and the federation name. The name will be auto expanded to the fully qualified domain name by local DNS. But before doing that, it will search for a local shard if there is any, and if there is any, it will resolve to that. Otherwise, if there are no shards here, so that's when it will contact the global DNS with this naming scheme, like a zone and then the region and then the domain. So the global DNS will be able to resolve this to the nearest zone. If not, then nearest region. If that also is not possible, the global service. Okay, so that's how it's getting resolved. So the design is pretty much the same, which we had for quite a long time now. So this is how it happens. The resolution starts with this name, and if it contains any target endpoints, it would resolve to that. And if there are none, there will be a CNAME record which will be pointing to region level name. And the similar thing happens until there is a global level. If there are no service shard across a global level, then there is a global outage. There is no service shard at all. So otherwise, it should resolve to any one of the service shard within this level. Okay, I have a small demo to showcase that feature. So in here, I have 2 clusters already. Okay, C1 and C2. C1 is in US region and zone US1, and EU and EU1 is this thing. And I have already deployed the federation control plane on this. So I'm now going to deploy this DNS services which are required. Okay. Yeah, these are going to be deployed in the C1 cluster. So, but it could be deployed anywhere. So it creates a separate namespace for those services. Now this etcd is for core DNS. In this example, I'm using a core DNS as an example. And etcd is kind of acting like a backend for that core DNS. So please don't get confused for this etcd. And there is a core DNS I'm installing through Helm chart. And now I'm deploying our federation DNS service through a local Helm chart. Then there is a slight configuration we need to do for the Kubernetes DNS, which is the current local DNS, to fall back to the global DNS. That we do using the stub zones feature within the Kubernetes DNS. So that's done for all the clusters. So we have created a config map in a federation. So that will configure those config map in all the federated cluster. now the DNS is all set up. There's a core DNS deployment which is working, and there is a federation DNS which is working. This federation DNS internally uses the DNS provider library to program. Right now it is configured to use core DNS. So these are the Helm chart values. The federation name I'm using is Galactic, and then domain name is dzone.io. Okay, and then provider is core DNS, and this is a container image which I have already pre-pushed, built and pushed already. Okay, and coming to core DNS, it is using a backend, etcd backend, and the zone name, it will be authoritative is dzone.io, and the endpoint, this is the etcd endpoint, the backend. so through which we'll be programming it. Now coming to the demo. So okay, let me. So we have a federated replica set or placement. So it will be deployed in C1 and C2, and there is a federated replica set template, which is a simple container which will just print out some environment variables. Okay, and then we have a federated service placement. It is also deployed on C1 and C2 both. And we have a federated service. Here there is a load balancer service, okay, which will be matching the replica sets which we deploy. And there is a multi-cluster service DNS object we need to create with a similar name. Spec, I'm not adding much here for this example, but it can be added. Right now it is unused in the V1 variant. In V2, maybe we can use that. The user need to give the same domain name for the federation which he is intending. And okay, so this is creating those in the federation control plane. Okay, it's deploying right now. Okay, so now it is the containers are running. The name of the service is FS1, and it has 2 endpoints in cluster 1, and in cluster 2 it's having 2 more ports. Okay, now if I do a curl with the FQDN, this is the external client. I'm doing it from my host machine. So we need to give the FQDN of the service. Now it has resolved to C2 pod. Okay, I do that for some more time. See, it is doing a round robin now between C2 and C1. Okay, this is how it does from the external client. So I have another pod DNS tool which is deployed into C1 cluster. Now from here I'll be doing a curl to the short name. So it would be resolving to the service shard within the cluster. So it is not going to C2, as you can see. So here you can also give a complete this thing. Then it can go to either one of them right now. Okay. And now I'll patch the replica placement such that it deploys only in C2. And again curl it right now. Okay, sorry. It's it will go to only C2. Right now there is no ports in C1. Okay. And from internally, if I try to do this, ideally it should resolve and then finally it should go to C2. Ideally, this is the situation it should happen, but I'm unable to set it up. The DNS, the core DNS which is there right now, it is not a publicly resolvable service right now. So, and I was not able to set it up in the resolve chain. So currently this particular part is not working. So we have an issue with that actually, but it can resolve to if we are giving a complete domain name. Yeah, it's there's a slight delay. Mostly what's happening is it resolves to C1, but there are no backend ports. Then finally it is falling back to C2. Yeah, sometimes it goes to C1, sometimes it goes to C2. Okay, sorry. Okay, so but this case won't happen if you are using a publicly accessible DNS service. So okay, hopefully that should be solved. And okay, and that's it. Any questions?
So, Shashi, this was with the Fed DNS programming DNS, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So you want to show the external DNS?
Yeah, I was wondering what the status of the external DNS stuff is.
Okay. Okay. I'll try to.
This is awesome. This is a great demo.
Okay, I'm cleaning up all the DNS services which we had. Okay, so for using the external DNS, okay, what we can do is giving a v2 for the script right now. Okay, I'll take you through what happens there. Okay, I'm creating the Fed DNS, the same core DNS service I'm deploying. That's a global DNS. Now, the Federation DNS service will be run with the variant 2, which will be using external DNS. For external DNS, I'm using a Helm chart to run. Rest all steps are same. And so here in V2, we are running this external DNS service as a Helm chart. And these are the values, default values which we are doing. Provider is core DNS. And there is a new connector. It's called connector sources, actually. Sources. And this will be the service name. Federation DNS 80, and this will be our etcd URL through which external DNS will be able to program. So okay, it is all running now. Okay, and now I'll start the same demo.
Especially in this case, the multi-cluster DNS object that you would have created would have different fields. Like in the previous one, you were not really using that.
Yeah. Actually, what's happening is in the Federation DNS, right? So it is still optional, but you can override them actually. So Federation DNS service, which I'm starting, just a minute. Here I'm starting this Federation DNS. Here I'm supplying the Federation name and the domain name. So it will, whenever it is sending out the endpoints, it will calculate all those and then send out the endpoint list. So external DNS really need not take care of anything. It just has the names, it has the DNS names, and it has the targets where to and the record type, and that's all it needs. So it is already taken care by Federation DNS. But if you are overriding that in the user supplied object, as a spec, like this is the DNS name, and then this will be the this thing. So that is what will be supplied to the endpoints.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So okay, waiting for the pods to get deployed. Okay, these are the new endpoints. Okay, sorry. Oh, okay, it's doing now. Okay, it's hitting C2 and C1 sometimes. Okay, and then from internal tools, yeah, it's always hitting C1. So okay, I think I didn't patch this. It's patched. So now you always get C2. Yeah, I think most probably here it is not able to reach. But if you use the complete domain name, this is how it should resolve. Okay. Yeah, these are the DNS records which it is getting. So when we do this, it would be redirected to another name in the region, and that will be redirected to global region. Right now we have only 2 clusters, and that has these endpoints right now. Okay, so one of them will be hit, and right now it is showing the other records also. Probably this is because of the caching, DNS caching, which is happening. So this is one of a problem with the DNS, as we already know. The client should redirect if it is not able to reach the endpoint with that name to another target. Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of pretty much done here. So any other doubts?
Awesome demo. So Shashi, I know that you got the source change merged into external DNS. Were you going to work further on that, or what's your feeling about the best way to proceed in terms of?
I was supposed to follow through your comments, Paul, but I got entangled in a few other things. So I'll be taking it up further next week. Actually, next week we are attending a ContainerCon in China. So once we are back from there, I think probably I should be able to take it up.
Awesome. All right, great demo. Thanks a lot, Shashi.
Yeah, no problem, Paul.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we
Thanks,
are
Shashi.
overshooting already. Sorry for that.
Yeah, one more point. Like Shashi mentioned that we were going to be in China for the conference next week. We might not be able to make it for the meeting. So, I mean, you guys can have the meeting if you want, or we can cancel it for the next week. We can meet next week.
That next week you're talking about?
Yeah, next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we are not available.
Okay.
Canceling it, but I think we need to nail down exactly what should be in this first alpha release, which we were going to target end of June. So that's basically here.
And just to
Yeah.
clarify, like end of June is the target for 111, and so we're really targeting the release of 111. Not saying we want to shirk, but we can't really release something until people have a Kube API server that's going to be compatible.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So I'd be fine canceling next week, but I think we also might want to consider talking more often, barring people being out of the office at conferences and stuff, to make sure that we're in close communication as we get to the point where we're going to release an alpha. I've found that to work pretty well in other groups. It does not have to be an hour every day, and it's very expensive to have an hour, but we might consider like 15-minute extra meetings like once or twice a week to be in touch by voice.
Yeah, and I have one more request. Like, do you guys think that next end of June, that'll be like next weekend, I guess, is a really reasonable time to cut out this release, or maybe a week further might be better? Like, I did not get the point Maru was making. KTS also is releasing 1.11 end of June. What was the point that you made, Maru?
That you're not going to be able to use Federation V2 without Q111.
Yeah, so our release has to follow that, right?
I
That's
believe
what you
so,
meant.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or
So
be
maybe-
at the same time. I mean, once they've solidified things, there's usually if we're ready to go, when they're ready to release, then we'll release simultaneously.
Yeah, and if your PR for CRDs is basically up and running, then we'll need some follow-up time to move the code that we are merging for other controllers, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's not going to be a huge amount of churn. I mean, if you look at the PR, I do need to rebase to incorporate some of your changes, but it's mainly on the API level. I'll have to go and do some fix-up. Controllers are relatively easy. Anyway, so I think I'm on the home stretch in terms of just getting it working, and then it's a matter of just cleaning it up and getting the PR ready. I'm off tomorrow, but I would be hopeful of getting something ready to merge by Friday.
Okay. And I mean, I was intending to like sort of working on that HPA controller stuff also. So what would be your suggestion? Like, I can bootstrap the API directly onto the Cube builder also, rather than bootstrapping it here in API server builder, and then you make moving it or I moving it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not really sure we want to be targeting something like that for alpha, just because we're kind of down to the wire. I mean, granted, you're kind of blocked on me getting the Cube Builder stuff in to hammer on other things, like getting usability maybe up or fixing whatever issues, but I think right now I would suggest a feature freeze would be in order.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not suggesting we don't work on it, just that maybe we would want to hold off merging it until we release an alpha.
Okay.
But what do you think of that? I mean, that's kind of my idea. I'm not saying that has to be the rule.
Yeah, I mean, I had this thought also, like, we can go ahead and release our alpha, like the first cut version, or I mean, like end of June or whatever time that we actually did decide. And we can do some follow-up releases after that, maybe sub-releases kind of a thing, every week or every 2 weeks, something like that.
I think that sounds good. I mean, alpha doesn't mean we cease development. I mean, I think Paul suggested that we do, like, maybe we want to release weekly or, bi-weekly or whatever. It's more that we get to a point where we want to start, we've driven it to a point where people can start using it and have a reasonable degree of confidence that it's not going to be possibly difficult.
Yeah, I am hopeful and have as a goal. So I have as a goal And I think we all share this goal of making Federation as easy to use and develop as we can. And I am hopeful that our initial alpha release will basically be the point at which we say, hey, use this, try it out. If you find, if you want to extend it, you can. If you find bugs, we'll work with you on it. But like, it's basically a stamp of like, you don't have to be a developer to use it. Right now, you need the development dependencies to even deploy it. But I'm hopeful that we'll get more people using it and trying it out and collaborating with us, and that we'll have a reason to release quickly. So I would hope that alpha is the start of things accelerating and not vice versa.
Yeah, makes sense, Paul. So let's go ahead. Let's go ahead with our timeline of cutting alpha, and whatever is there, it is there. Further features can still continue being developed, and we can do releases post that.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, guys. So next week, most probably, we won't be talking, but if there are some things that we need to talk or discuss, we can chat over Slack. Okay.
And just to say that I'll be off, and actually I'm guessing Paul will be off as well the following Wednesday, because that is July 4th. Wednesday. So if we do want to hold a meeting that week, we may want to push it forward or back. I'm actually going to be off all that week from Wednesday on, so if we want to hold it and have me attend Monday or Tuesday, but I'm not saying I have to be the person that makes or breaks the meeting.
So what you are saying is that you and Paul probably won't be there Wednesday, 4th of July onwards. But you're available prior to that.
Wednesday and the rest of the week, but Paul will be there probably just not the Wednesday, and I would imagine it would be off too. So if we want to hold a meeting, we probably want to push it to a day that's not that important.
Yeah, Wednesday, July 4th is a big holiday in the US, so probably very few people will be attending from the community in the US.
How does Friday sound? Like same time? Are you guys, do you have free time on Friday?
Next Friday?
This Friday. Yeah, sorry, next Friday. 29th of June.
I could be available.
Paul?
Yeah, I think I could be available too. I might have to move some stuff around, but I would like to be able to talk next week.
Cool. Then let's. What I'll do, I'll update the notice for the next week's meeting to Friday 29th, same time.
That works.
Cool.
Okay. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.